Drones, drills, deals, and a dangerous reality. Ukraine joins forces with Australia to boost drone power. NATO trains right on Russia's doorstep, and Moscow is watching. Trump's advisor claims he can end the war in just 6 months, but on the ground there is no end in sight. And the political chaos is hitting the battlefield hard. As Russia legalizes torture and abandons diplomacy, the world is asking what's really coming next. Welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Zurislava Kolesnikova, and we are diving into the headline that shock, the alliances that matter, and the brutal truth behind every promise. Let's get started. Ukraine and Australia team up on drones' new defense alliance. Australia joined the drone front. A top military delegation has arrived in Kiev to learn from Ukraine's combat tester experience in drone warfare. Led by Brigadier General Grant Chambers, the team is exploring how both nations can work together on cutting-edge UAVs technology. Meanwhile, Ukraine has already secured deals with partners to expand and fund drone production at scale. How is Ukraine turning war pressure into military innovation? All the details in our report.
Kiev and Vilnius will jointly produce defense products to strengthen the security of both countries. The corresponding letter of intent was signed in Kiev by the heads of the defense ministries of Ukraine and Lithuania, Denis Shmyhal and Dovile Shakaliene. This will create opportunities to launch new enterprises, develop Ukrainian companies in Lithuania, and exchange technologies. In particular, this concerns long-range drones.
Importantly, Lithuania will continue to allocate 0.25% of its GDP for military aid to Ukraine until 2027. This is a strong signal of long-term support for our soldiers. We focused on attracting additional funding for the procurement of weapons and the development of Ukrainian industry. Thank you to Lithuania for its consistent and unwavering support of Ukraine on the path to victory. Denis Shmyhal, Minister of Defense of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Ottawa also plans to join Ukraine in the joint production of drones. This was announced by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney during his visit to Kyiv on August 24th. According to him, preparations have already begun in the country to set up facilities for drone production to strengthen the armed forces of Ukraine. Ottawa will allocate part of the $2 billion that Canada is providing to Ukraine under the G7 agreements to finance this initiative.
We will allocate more than $200 million for the joint production of defense materials in our two countries, in particular modern unmanned aerial vehicles with the involvement of Canadian suppliers.
There are important signed documents, clear agreements, and an action plan for implementing the security agreement between our countries. An agreement on administrative assistance in customs matters was also signed at the ministerial level, as well as an agreement on drone production.
Canberra will adopt Kiev's experience in developing the drone industry. An Australian delegation has arrived in Ukraine. It includes experts in unmanned systems and technologies. Canberra is interested in scaling up drone production as well as their combat use and the training of relevant personnel.
We are grateful to Australia for its political and financial support as well as for the supply of weapons. For our part, we are ready to share our experience in developing the drone industry. Serhiy Boyev, Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, on the ministry's website.
Norway is ready to help develop Ukrainian drone production, said the country's Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre during his visit to Kyiv on August 25th. Earlier, Denis Shmyhal reported that since the beginning of the year, Oslo has allocated $400 million for the purchase of Ukrainian UAVs.
Norway is a participant in the drone coalition, and we are investing in Ukrainian industry. We will use this visit to move forward in this direction and to produce such weaponry as efficiently as possible.
In 2025-2026, Oslo intends to allocate almost $8.5 billion to support Kyiv under the Nansen program. The program is designed to support Ukraine from 2023 to 2027. The distribution of funds takes place annually according to Ukraine's needs.
I asked the Prime Minister to consider allocating the remaining funds for this year under the Nansen program specifically for drones. This would make a very significant difference. And the more drones we have, both to defend our positions and for long-range strikes, the greater the pressure on Russia will be for the sake of peace.
Volodymyr Zelensky also thanked Norway for supplying NASAM's air defense missile systems. According to him, Kyiv hopes to establish joint production of these air defense systems. In addition, the day before, Oslo, together with Berlin, announced the allocation of $700 million for the purchase of air defense systems for Ukraine, according to the Norwegian government's website. Andriy Dimitrenko for Freedom TV channel.
NATO drills near Russia, troops training in Finland. NATO is sending a clear message with both on the ground just miles from Russia's border. In Finland, European and US troops have launched major military drills set to last over 2 weeks. Why so close to Russia? What scale they are shaping? And what signal is NATO sending to the Kremlin? Everything you need to know in full report.
The international military exercise Southern Griffin 25 has begun in Finland. The maneuvers involve 1,600 military personnel from Europe and the United States. The Finnish Ministry of Defense announced back at the beginning of August that, starting from the second half of 2025, US troops will be actively participating in exercises on Finnish territory and in the Baltic Sea, thereby increasing their military presence there. Little-known Russian sources are reporting on the alliance's exercises right at Russia's borders. Top Russian propagandists as well as the official Kremlin remain silent.
In recent years, Moscow has observed unprecedented NATO activity near Russia's western borders. The alliance, expanding its operations, justifies this by the need to deter aggression. The Russian side has repeatedly expressed concern over the buildup of the bloc's military presence in Europe. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has emphasized its readiness for dialogue with NATO on an equal footing, provided the West abandons the militarization of the continent.
The Southern Griffin 25 exercises involve NH-90 transport helicopters and MD-500 light helicopters, which belong to the Uti-Jaeger regiment, as well as F-16 Hornet fighter jets in service with the Finnish armed forces. In addition, aircraft from the armed forces of various European countries and the United States will also participate in the maneuvers. After Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Finland, in order to secure itself, joined NATO almost immediately. Now, exercises are held here on a regular basis.
The Russian Federation periodically raises the issue of a possible armed confrontation scenario with NATO and the new countries that have joined the alliance. Specifically, this refers to Sweden and Finland. Let's recall at least those events when the so-called map of possible territorial claims by the Russian Federation against a number of Baltic countries appeared. Moreover, it was about possible Russian control over the Swedish island of Gotland.
These exercises are part of the implementation of the Agreement on Defense Cooperation between Helsinki and Washington, according to which the American side will gain access to 15 Finnish military facilities. In a recent interview, Finnish President Alexander Stubb stated that the militarization and preparation of Finland for a possible invasion will continue as long as the war in Ukraine persists.
As I have always emphasized, we can't do anything about our geography. We have a history with Russia and we will have a future with Russia. But today, of course, relations are very complicated. In fact, there are no relations because of the war. But someday, when the war is over, new relations will definitely be built. Finland will establish relations with Russia only after the war with Ukraine ends. Putin has united Europe, expanded NATO by bringing in Finland and Sweden, and has effectively increased NATO's defense spending from 2 to 5%.
The Russian Federation has repeatedly voiced its territorial claims and its intention to protect Russian-speaking populations in the Baltic countries and beyond. That is why Finland and other countries bordering the Kremlin are acting proactively. For now, Russia's main military resources are concentrated on the war in Ukraine.
Various dates are being mentioned, of course 2026 and later dates as well. So accordingly, NATO countries, specifically the closest neighbors, countries bordering the Russian Federation or nearby neighbors, are trying to replenish their arsenals with those types of weapons that will enable them to actively counter possible Russian aggression.
Recently, the US deployed 3 B-1B bombers to Norway for NATO exercises to practice coordination with allies, test combat readiness, and carry out a number of joint missions. The Southern Griffin 25 exercises on the border with Russia will continue until September 12th.
The Russians have finally, after 5 days, extinguished the oil refinery fire in Novoshakhtinsk.
We will submit it.
Yes.
Fire post, move back everyone, please move back. From the side of section BU-20.
Move back here, everyone. Please move back to this designated area. Go, move back. Take off your caps for now. Please remove your caps at this moment. Thank you. Copy that. We have received your message. We have 4 on the second. That's 4 individuals on the second floor. We have 4 on the second indeed. 4 people are currently on the second level. 4 on the second. No, that's 4 individuals positioned on the second floor.
Trump needs 6 months to end the war, advisor claims. 6 months, that's all Trump needs to end the war in Ukraine, says his advisor J.D. Vance. But what's behind this bold promise? Can Putin really be forced to stop the invasion and at the worst cost? As quiet talks continue behind the scenes, we take a closer look at what's unfolding in the peace process and who's really calling the shots.
Another 6 months, that's exactly how long. According to US Vice President J.D. Vance, that's how much time President Donald Trump might need to convince the Russian dictator Putin to stop the war in Ukraine.
What am I actually so excited about right now? That we have a president who is engaged in energetic diplomacy, trying to stop the killing, and whatever the result, whether the war ends in 3 months, 6 months, or hopefully not later, we should be proud of a president who is trying to put an end to the killing.
Vance assures that under Trump, the negotiations made more progress than during Biden's administration. Russia allegedly made significant concessions. The Kremlin no longer demands a puppet regime in Kyiv. They have agreed to security guarantees for Ukraine. In addition, the White House says that Vance is already applying aggressive economic pressure. And Moscow can return to a peaceful economy if it stops the killing.
I believe that in this specific scenario, the Trump administration will undoubtedly persist in acting in precisely the same manner as it has previously, consistently offering a variety of enticing perks and significant advantages to the Kremlin. However, concurrently, there will also be a clear and discernible emergence of new, more pronounced threats that are explicitly voiced and articulated. And I do not entirely rule out the distinct possibility that Donald Trump might actually make such a truly serious and impactful decision regarding the nation of Russia, regarding the Kremlin, in the profound sense that if Vladimir Putin does not genuinely agree to comprehensive negotiations for a truly peaceful and lasting settlement, or if he deceptively says he agrees, but then continues to persistently put forward all these extreme and maximalist conditions for ultimately ending the hostilities.
However, the entire civilized world understands that it is impossible to accept Moscow's terms and Ukraine cannot do so. And even hypothetically, if it were possible, such concessions would destroy the entire international architecture. And the world would face crises in every corner.
This would fundamentally and irrevocably destroy the entire intricate and carefully constructed architecture of the international system, dismantling all the significant and hard-won achievements and eradicating everything truly positive and beneficial that was painstakingly created and established in the aftermath of the devastating end of World War II. And this would, in fact, mean opening Pandora's box. And then, let's put it this way, many sovereign countries across the globe could potentially face very serious crises and significant challenges because one way or another, if, let's say, Vladimir Putin is indeed allowed to fully achieve what he truly desires, this will, so to speak, inevitably create a profoundly serious and exceptionally dangerous precedent for all of us, for the entire international community, and for the future of global stability.
But if Trump suddenly changes his mind, gets angry, and decides to put pressure on Putin for being uncooperative, the main unused trump card is the confiscation of about $300 billion in frozen Russian foreign currency reserves. But it's in the hands of the Europeans since even before the war, Putin moved all the money out of what was then a hostile America and into Europe. That's why the 47th president has only one powerful measure left: secondary sanctions against buyers of Russian energy resources. The export of oil and gas allows the Kremlin to finance the war. The United States has long imposed a full embargo, while Europe has a partial one. However, the aggressor has redirected supplies to China and India and continues to sell relatively small volumes on the European market, primarily to Hungary and Slovakia, where the authorities are loyal to Putin. And here, Ram took the first step towards secondary sanctions and announced that starting August 27th, an additional 25% tariff would be imposed on imports of Indian goods to the US if India does not stop buying oil from Russia. This is a turning point and truly a painful threat. I'm sure the Indian oil card played its part. 6 months of diplomacy, full of promises and threats. But so far, behind the loud words, there is only another dose of hope. Russia continues to exploit every loophole to finance the war. And millions of Ukrainians continue to pay the price in blood. Will Trump be able to convince Putin to stop the killing? A question to which the answer is increasingly becoming rhetorical.
No end in sight, politics are shaping the battlefield. The end of the war still far away. Trump signals he no longer wants to spend money on Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Kremlin moves to legalize torture inside Russia. How are these brutal political shifts affecting the front lines? And what should Ukraine prepare for next? The answers are coming in our full report.
The road of life to Kherson is under drone attack. There are already the first casualties.
There are still many cars unfortunately left here that came under a devastating drone attack. One of them is even still burning intensely right now.
According to the local authorities, the Russians are actively shelling the Mykolaiv-Kherson highway. Due to the activity of enemy drones, people are urged not to travel on it, as it has turned into a road of death. The regional military administration advises choosing a different route to Kherson. This route does not go directly, but runs along the coast of the southern Bug. Yes, the road is almost 30 kilometers longer, but it is definitely safer. Meanwhile, the Russians are reverting to the Middle Ages. The aggressor state is preparing to withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights regarding the prevention of torture. The Russian Prime Minister has signed a decree to submit the proposal to Putin, who is to present it to the State Duma, where it will be considered. Experts explain that there is nothing extraordinary about this, since Russia has not been adhering to this convention since the beginning of the full-scale invasion anyway. And by now, everyone has long seen the condition in which Ukrainian soldiers and civilians return from Russian captivity. The norms that the democratic world is used to simply do not apply to Russia. Putin has built a prison system, and he greatly enjoys humiliating people, whether they are his own citizens or others. And to him there is no difference. American President Donald Trump does not notice this and wants in every possible way to make peace with Moscow. The head of the White House says that in the end the war will be stopped. At the same time, he noted that the details of security guarantees for Ukraine have not yet been discussed. Trump also mentioned the aid that the Biden administration provided to Ukraine, claiming it amounted to $350 billion. However, now the American president has stated that the US is no longer giving any money to Ukraine. He simply deceived him. The Kremlin dictator Vladimir Putin deceived the American leader Donald Trump, making him believe that he was making serious concessions. He gave the impression that he was ready to give up some of his maximalist demands. This is reported by Foreign Affairs. As for the main issue, Putin achieved his key goal for the meeting. He convinced Trump that the White House's peace efforts should focus on reaching a comprehensive agreement to end the war, rather than on an unconditional ceasefire, and that hostilities could continue in the meantime. Contrary to Trump's earlier statements, as well as the appeals of European leaders and Zelensky before the summit, the White House did not impose any punitive measures on Russia for the Kremlin's refusal to agree to a ceasefire. As for the land swap, which Putin convinced Trump of, this would actually turn into a disaster for Ukraine, since Kyiv could end up giving up a territory almost 10 times larger than what Russia is willing to return. Moreover, a quarter of Donetsk region, which is still controlled by Ukraine, including the strategic cities of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, is the most fortified part of the country and has been turned into a massive network of defensive structures since it was recaptured from Russia in 2014. For Zelensky, giving up this territory is virtually impossible for both political and military reasons, the publication reports. Yet it seems Trump does not see this and is pressuring Ukraine itself to make concessions.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you want honest reporting and bold analysis, like, comment and subscribe to our channel. And most importantly, become a sponsor. Your support keeps independent Ukrainian journalism alive and fearless. Stand with the truth, stand with us. Stay strong, stay informed and stay with Ukraine.